All right, and we are back, episode 15 of Chasing 69, a New York Jets podcast. Ignore my Colts hat. This is a Jets podcast, and I just realized I was wearing a Teddy. We are here a day later than usual. A little bit of a fuck up on my end. I didn't check my schedule from an event that I made 2 months ago, but we're here. It is Thursday, June 30th, heading into the month of July. We are getting so much closer to the Jets football season. Today, before we get into everything, I have a great podcast lined up for you. We are going to finish our Reading the Room series, going over the offensive line, and we're finally going to get to our Flight 2022 recap, which, if you're a Jets fan, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you've definitely already watched the entire thing. So you're just going to hear us kind of chalk up a little bit of our thoughts on it. We were a little late to the game on it, but fantastic series. But before we get into all of that, like I said, make sure to follow us on our social media platforms: Twitter at NYJ_chasing69, YouTube, the same page, Teddy at Teddy Huncho. I'm at Blake Andrew Pace. Teddy, I've spoken for a minute and a half now. How are you doing?
Doing well. You know, is 15 episodes enough to, like, is that a milestone yet, or do we have to wait for 25 before
25
throw ourselves a little mini?
25.
Okay.
This we'll
All
call
right.
this the
So
Brandon Marshall episode.
Yeah, that's
he wore
good.
15, right?
I like that. Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Brandon Marshall, the GOAT.
Tim Tebow.
Yeah, no, I'm doing good. I'm excited for this episode. Excited to talk about the O-line. Excited to talk about Flight 2022 because I mean, just like getting to immerse yourself in the Jets for, you know what, 2.5 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, right around there.
It's awesome. It's awesome. They have like a production company the way they do, and the people they have working for them like blow it out of the water. So yeah, I'm excited, but I'm doing well. I feel a little more. I feel like the past few weeks on the pod, I've been like really revved up from like life before it, but you know, kind of
things are settling down
today. Yeah,
I didn't ask you before.
Relaxed.
Let's get a little bit of a River update. How's your dog doing? Healing all right?
Oh, he's good. He's good. So we broke the leg. It's been 3 weeks. He's been in his hard cast for 2 weeks. So the plan is he's going to get some x-rays done on Monday, and then hopefully the following Monday he will be good to go and out of the cast. So 2 weeks left, hopefully, maybe longer, but that's what the doctors told us last week. So I'm pretty good. I mean, he runs around as if his leg is not broken.
Oh, good.
But so it's kind of, we just have to restrain him, but
Right.
He's doing good.
Good. That's good to hear. And one big update that we both didn't intentionally do, we didn't say we were going to do, but we're off the beer burps for this episode. We're going to give that
sadly, we're not drinking that a shot anymore. We're
I've got a
sober
nice
now.
Coffee here. Teddy has got a water. A lot of burps the last few weeks, and with all of our beers. So
we're like the burping podcast.
Yeah, we're the only Jets podcast that burps for 30 minutes. My dog found a toy that I don't want him to have, so I'm gonna grab it right now. And we're just gonna pretend like that didn't happen.
That was good. I didn't.
He brought it right to me. I think he wants to
play
right now. I think he's trying to play, and he's popping his head up.
Let's just do a dog episode.
Dog episode, yes. So we're gonna break down the dogs for the New York Jets. Teddy,
a lot of quickness, a lot of agility.
Yes,
keeps his feet under him well.
20 pounds though, so not really gonna move men around that well. So Teddy, a little bit of housekeeping as we always do, and like we've said the last few weeks, it has been pretty empty with that. A couple of things that we want to touch on. One of them being star edge rusher Carl Lawson, who we actually got to talk about last week in our Reading the Room series. Likely there's a chance he's going to start the training camp preseason area on the physically unable to perform list, still nursing from his Achilles injury right before last season began. Seems more like the Jets are trying to play things patient, as we spoke about, make sure he is 150% or 200% ready to go when the season starts, because he plays such a pivotal role for this defense. But when you saw that, were you a little bit surprised at all by the timeline and kind of him not being at 100% yet?
Yeah, I wouldn't say surprised. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started, that a lot of these kind of Achilles injuries are having a shorter timeline, 9-10 months for some guys on your Colts. But just one of those things where obviously you would like to see him healthy, see him out there. But I do kind of lean on the side of that he's going to be out there week one. I think the Jets are probably, just being precautionary. I'm hoping that is the case. So yeah, I mean, not much to add from what you said. It's one of those things where you don't love to see it, but it's not the end of the world. It's not like it's completely out of the ordinary for an Achilles injury. And it does seem like the Jets are being extra careful this year, trying to keep their guys on the field, actually being able to be out there. So we'll hope for the best.
Yeah, I hear you. The only thing that I don't love is you would like a guy to be in football shape by week 1, and it's tough to get into that if you're not getting the reps in for the preseason. And I think,
For sure.
we started to see a lot of that with certain players the last few years, whether, because of COVID, they got less time. Rookies were really struggling out of the gate because they hadn't gotten into football shape because of the limited schedule they have. Lawson being a guy that's a bit into his career, hopefully in those prime year stages. I'm sure that he knows what he needs to do to get his body ready. And he's dealt with an injury before earlier in his career. So I'm sure he's figured out a way to best handle and prepare for, missing some of those reps. You'd love to see everybody healthy. As far as where we're at right now, it's not a bad injury list for the Jets. I'm going to knock on wood on this table right now. Teddy's doing a sign of the cross. So obviously things are pretty healthy right now for New York. And then, getting him back and making sure he's 100% ready will be nice. It's really the only other thing is like, this defensive line, as we spoke about last week, is so new together, outside of, Quinnen and John Franklin Myers, that you really would love to see them all get pretty comfortable out there, especially given the start of the season and the difficulty of that schedule and the physicality of some of those offensive lines. I mean, Cincinnati beefed theirs up, but it's still probably not that great. Baltimore is always going to be great. Pittsburgh's always going to have a good line. Cleveland's got a good line. So,
yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lawson kind of had an injury history before the Jets, right?
Yeah, this was early in his career. I believe it might have been his second season. He missed the entire year.
Yeah, and I mean, and then last year. So
right,
it's not. I mean, it's what, June 30th.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world that he's not ready on June 30th, but it is one of those things where, you got to avoid that injury prone kind of narrative. You got to avoid, like, at some point we need to see Carl Lawson out there. We signed him. It's been a year without seeing him any games. Like, I just want to see him out there. So you do worry a little about that. It's not like it's a new injury, though. It's him recovering from his old injury. Hopefully the Jets are just taking it easy on him, not trying to lose him before the season starts. So we'll wait and see. Nothing to panic about yet, but
exactly. The other funny thing, just like looking at his game log, he's only started 14 games in his career, which is kind of funny. But
yeah,
to have all those expectations that he does, but obviously, hopefully he lives up to those. But that's one piece of news that we had. And then Teddy, you were on the Twitter sphere, diving through Jets Twitter the other day, and found a nice piece, kind of just a hypothetical trade out there. So kind of talk to me about a little bit of what you saw, what you read.
Yeah,
because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know where this started, because I did, I was trying to get some more information on it, and a couple sources have kind of covered it and talked about it. I don't know if that's all stemming from one, but the person I saw was Paul Andrew Esden Jr. Want to give credit where credit's due. Just put out an article kind of talking about a possibility that the Jets would trade for Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons was out of Clemson a few years back, and kind of a defensive back, linebacker hybrid, kind of one of those players. I remember in the draft process, just kind of no one really knew where he was going to fit, but he kind of just has this, otherworldly athleticism, the type of guy who a lot of people thought was going to be a huge star. He hasn't had a bad first 2 years, but just hasn't been great, hasn't been the player that he was drafted to be. And so this Paul guy, he wrote an article, just about the possibility of the Jets trading for him. And it is interesting because we've been doing our Reading the Room series. I think that linebacker was our weakest position that we both graded out. I think we both gave him a D-. So the need is there. And when you look at the type of player, I guess, in person that Isaiah Simmons is, he's this kind of guy who had sky high expectations, has athleticism off the charts, but just hasn't really lived up to those expectations, which is in line with what Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas have done the past year and a half, 2 years. I feel like that's kind of one of Joe Douglas's favorite things to do, is try to find these guys with untapped potential, try to put them, try to get them to like succeed. And I don't think we've seen that come to fruition yet, but at some point, one of these guys will hopefully hit. Maybe that's underselling him. Some of the guys we've signed have come out of nowhere, but yeah, I just think it would make a lot of sense if we did. Obviously, who knows what the market actually is? Who knows how bad the Cardinals actually want to trade him? But yeah, I mean, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah Simmons is coming out of college, a freak athlete. And that was the thing, is just like, okay, what's his role going to be? And whenever that's the case with a player, it takes a lot of time to really figure that out. There's not a guy, I guess the only guy people were wondering, like, is Micah Parsons going to be a linebacker? Is he going to be a defensive end? And it turned out it didn't matter. He was going to be fucking fantastic at either. But Isaiah Simmons, it was like, okay, safety, linebacker, where is he going to be? The right defense is so important for a guy like that. And Arizona, it just never really was a great fit. And now, you're a couple years in and you're like, okay, well, he's not living up to the potential on our team, but maybe he can provide value to a different, kind of scheme. So yeah, why not put him out there as trade bait? They went and they doubled up. They took another linebacker in the first round in the 2021 draft. So it's like, okay, they're either just really loving these linebackers, or they understand that they might have made a little bit of a mistake the year prior. So, if Isaiah Simmons is available, I don't think the asking price would be much at all, because I don't think he's been fantastic. But like you said, a perfect fit at a position desperately needed in New York, just given how thin they are at linebacker. We've talked about how they're taking a look at Quan Alexander, and Quan Alexander had a lot of success in this defense, but he's not that Quan Alexander. He, is very inconsistent, hasn't been able to stay healthy, and is old. So, buying in on guys that, as like we said, and we'll talk about in this Flight 2022 series, like buying into these guys as they're about to take off is huge. And I think for Isaiah Simmons, he probably just needs a different situation to become that. Jets would be a perfect opportunity for that. So
yeah,
not that it's like you said, it hasn't been like reported like, oh, the Jets are like deep into trade talks with the Cardinals about Isaiah Simmons.
Right.
I think as we get closer to the season, a lot of it plays into what Carolina or Arizona looks like, how comfortable they feel with their other linebackers, because at the end of the day, they're not just going to give them away if they don't feel comfortable with the rest of the room. And linebacker is one of those positions that across the league is pretty scarce. And so you would have to feel really good about some of your other guys there to go ahead and trade away a top 10 asset, or a former top 10 pick is what I mean. But if they feel comfortable with that, why wouldn't the Jets make that call?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like what it comes down to is the Cardinals aren't going to give him up for nothing. Just because that name value's there. He was a top 10 pick, and it's not like he's done horrible. You're just exactly right that it just hasn't been a great fit. So, I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about. I think what I saw a lot was the comparison to Fred Warner, for Robert Saleh, taking a guy converted defensive back to a linebacker, who really became a star, and I think it's kind of just looking for that type of opportunity where we're going to turn a player who's not reaching his potential to one of the best at his positions, So if we get Isaiah Simmons, I'd be all about it. I think he'd be a starter right away with us.
Would be very fun. Oh yeah. Yep. He would definitely fill in right on one of those outside spots. So yeah, that's really all we had for housekeeping. Teddy, you ready to put a bow on this Reading the Room series?
Yeah. One position group left.
Alrighty.
Offensive line. A fun time. And I'm excited to see the final graphic with all our grades. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Yes. And then we can look back halfway through the season and be like, oh, yep, we really overhyped these positions.
Yeah. Underhyped dead wrong. Is what I'm hoping.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Hopefully that. All right, Teddy. So the offensive line, I think the best way to do this is just go starter by starter, left to the right side, finish up with a few depth guys. Number one, left tackle, George Fant, leader of the offense. Someone that we continue to talk about. He's in contract negotiations with an extension with the Jets, and the biggest thing, and then, the biggest reason outside of him just being a comfortable fit at left tackle, is his impact in the locker room and his leadership that he brings to the offense. So clearly a super important guy in that aspect. Fantastic in one-on-one pass protection. The team as a whole struggled a little bit in those non-one-on-one pass situations, passing guys off. And I think that happens more when you've got a few weak links on the inside. And hopefully they've patched those up. But he's a great leader, great in one-on-one pass protection, which is what you need out of a left tackle, especially for a young quarterback. And then he's also great at not drawing penalties. I think he had maybe 4 last year. It was somewhere in the 4 to 7 range. I can't remember, but not many at all. So he's great in that aspect. One thing that you take a look at in terms of, and I guess this is more of the left side of the line, where they struggled a little bit was in zone run blocking, which, as we'll talk about in a little bit with Laken Tomlinson, does that help fix that? Is that why Elijah Vera Tucker's over on the right side? Both of those two, Fant and Elijah Vera Tucker, had the lowest zone run blocking grades this past season. So maybe that's why they're switching things up. In total, and specifically with Fant too, I think he was the worst at gap blocking this past year. And I think that's just, this team is built to be a zone blocking team. So, and it's going to be what they run 90% of the time. So I'm not too worried about it. And I'm getting more into, I guess, the line as a whole, but George Fant, his impact, what he brings to the table. What are your thoughts on the Jets left tackle?
Yeah, I mean, I think those points about, just the struggle in the zone run blocking and if that's kind of why AVT moved and yeah, that's moving away from Fant a little, but I do think that's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. And maybe that is why they want to shuffle this up a little bit. You also got to throw in that Laken was the left guard already, but in terms of Fant just specifically, I mean, yeah, you did a great job kind of giving the overview. He played his butt off last year, like he outperformed my expectations. I think he outperformed everyone's expectations. I guess my only thing with Fant is, and it could just be like pessimism or whatever, but it does creep in your mind that this is a guy who 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we all kind of hated because it was like, this guy stinks, and he's doing nothing. What I do think, he moved to the left side, which is more of his natural position. So that obviously helps him. And then I also just think that, we're here year 2 in a scheme, which there wasn't a lot of consistency these past few years with the Jets. I think, it's a scheme we can believe in. I think we've talked about it again and again, but adding tight ends who are going to be able to block, help him out a little bit, adding Laken on the line. I just think Fant has shown that he can be a really consistent player and sometimes, pretty great player. And I think that especially with the line that we've put together, he's not someone we have to worry about at all. Even if he doesn't come out and completely dominate like he did last year and just be the best lineman on our team, I think that you're at least not going to get the worst out of him. And I think that's really important in offensive line. I think a lot of times with offensive line, you just need average or better. And I think George Fant is definitely better. So yeah, I mean, feeling good about it. I think me and you might see differently on this, but I don't expect it to be as clear as George Fant is just the left tackle. I think that definitely, like, if Mekhi Becton can get back on the field and starts to play, I think that will be kind of like a competition-esque thing. But that all depends on Mekhi actually playing first. So right now, George Fant is the left tackle.
I do like that you brought that up. So you would even say that, we just spoke about how Fant improved getting back to that left side and being more of an efficient player over there. Is that something that you think he could take that to the right side and be just fine now with some better players around him? Or because, like, to me, when I look at him, I think given his age as well too, and it just at least the confidence that you can have in him. And actually one of my favorite points of the Flight 2022 series kind of relates to this, his reliability. I would think, don't mess around with that. Keep him on the left side. Becton's got all the time in the world to be that left tackle, but he has to prove that he can be that, I would say. And since that is the most important position of the line, I would just think he had a really solid year out of Fant. You probably don't have too many more left. So instead of trying to maybe mess with his mojo, I would just want to keep him out there and say, Becton, stay on that right side. You're the future left tackle, but you have to kind of earn that, I feel like.
Yeah, I don't hate that thinking at all. I really don't. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess all that creeps in my mind is like when we did see Becton out there 2 years ago, I mean, he was like basically playing at an all pro level,
Right.
and was
No,
dominating.
that's a good point.
So the only, obviously it just comes down and this is good, this is how we want it to come down.
It's a good problem to have.
It just comes down to like, is the line going to be better having Fant left, Becton right? Or is the line going to be better having, and obviously that's just all kind of how it's going to go down in camp. And it's one of the things I'm really excited to just be on the lookout for. I think everything you said made a lot of sense. And I think like thinking about it, that most likely that will be what happens, especially thinking that in the NFL, a lot of times players do play right tackle for a while and then move to left tackle. That's not like unheard of.
Yeah.
So yeah, super good point. I just think I at least am excited to see if there is a competition.
Right.
It's just something to keep our eye on for sure.
By the way, when we get to Becton, like we can just like clip our last 5 episodes.
Yeah, true. Because we've talked about him every week.
On.
Yeah,
we'll get to him eventually, but let's go to left guard, the new guy in town, Laken Tomlinson. When he first signed, I think everybody was like, well, AVT had such a great, rookie season, all pro left guard. Like Laken will just slide right over to the right side because he's experienced. And it's like, no, he is going to be on that left side. And I think, you're protecting the quarterback's blind side. It's a position that he's played. He was just a Pro Bowl left guard. So why mess with that? And that's kind of the same conversation we kind of just had with Fant. But he comes in now on that 3-year deal. One of the biggest acquisitions that the Jets had this past offseason. The Jets had a rookie guard last year who turned out to be a very talented player. They had another guard that it was just the bottomless pit of this offensive line. So being able to replace that with Laken Tomlinson, one of the biggest upgrades the team had made since last season. He's consistent in both the run and pass game. He's physical and available. I think it's like 81 starts in a row now. One of the best run zone blocking left guards in the game. Teddy, he's great to have.
Yeah, I mean, he outside of Mackay, who obviously didn't play last year, but he's like the only new starter on the line. But the amount that he improves this line at an overall level is, it's huge. Like looking at these 5 guys and replacing Laken Tomlinson with whoever,
Van
McDermott or Van Roten, exactly. Yeah, like those guys stink, and Laken Tomlinson was a Pro Bowler last year. We've talked about it before, but I love these guys who played with Saleh before. I just think that's, you have that connection of not only is he a good player, but he's a good player who's done well with those same type of guys, with guys on the offensive coaching staff. And he's a guy who's obviously has that high character, and again, this is something we're going to talk about when we talk about Flight 2022, but he's just one of those high character, high leadership guys. The Jets have been consistently like bringing in the right type of people, and, plenty of people had their, in their opinion, had him as the number 1 guard over a guy like Brandon Scherff last year in free agency. So like, he's a very good player. We got him. I think he was our first offseason addition, so it's awesome. I love it.
It is.
I couldn't be more excited to see him out there. And, well, to talk about like the right guard switch, I mean, we'll talk about Tucker in a bit. But yeah, I think this more so than the Fant Becton thing is a scenario where Tomlinson's been a left guard. He's done it at a Pro Bowl level, and you have Vera Tucker, who has so much experience moving and playing different. I mean, this will be 4 or 5 years in a row that Vera Tucker's playing a different position, so it's not like that's new to him. So I do think that's kind of the right move. And I think that's going to be something that's not really a question mark in camp is, are they going to end up switching those guys?
Yeah, they have good problems on the offensive line. And, we'll move on to the middle of the line, which I have right here. It's the weakest link of the offensive line, but it's not necessarily a weak link. Connor McGovern in there at center, bounce back year after an injury the year prior, coming over from Dallas as well too. Also, played pretty well despite, like we were just, I don't mean to just poop on Van Roten, but it makes life hard for a
We
center
can
when he
poop on
doesn't.
Van Roten.
When he has one of the worst guards playing next to him, that doesn't make your life easy as a center. So he's in there. He had a weird offseason, and I think because the Jets were so active and because center's not the most important position, this didn't get talked about much. But there was a point where the Jets were ready to kind of cut bait with him, and they had been flirting with Ryan Jensen. Brady comes back. Jensen spurns them to go back to Tampa. And I think it just kind of anything shows you, he's back. He's got another year left on his deal, but it seems like the Jets put such a priority into upgrading this offensive line that if he's not out there and is like a very, good center, they'll probably move on from him next offseason when his contract runs up. So he's in a contract year. It's a big season for him. It's nice to be in this situation. Like if it was a contract year this past season where he had shitty and inconsistent guard play and offensive line play around him, that's one thing, but he's in a really good position now. 2 great guards next to him, one of the best offensive lines in football to really not be great, but to not look bad. And so I think he's in a good scenario. So take me through a guy that,
I think
there's one of 2 ways. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think there's 2 types of Jets players that I've learned over the past, 10 to 15 years. And there's the ones that are pretty bad, but we think are better than they are, and there's the ones that are pretty good and we all kind of hate as Jets fans and think are bad. That.
Yeah.
And Connor McGovern, especially last year, was one of those guys where like he really wasn't all that bad. And especially you take into account the poor guard play. You take into account just, pretty bad team overall. A lot of injuries. Mekhi Becton's not out there. We had Dan Feeney in for some games. Like, it's not like we had the strongest line. Connor McGovern, especially just compared to other centers, was pretty average last year. So I do think that was kind of an interesting point in the offseason when we were thinking like, okay, are we going to move on? Sure, if we could have upgraded to a Ryan Jensen, that's a pretty easy question to answer. But then you look at kind of some of these other middle of the road guys, and it's like, are you really going to get any more out of them than you're going to get from McGovern? So I do agree. I mean, he is the weakest link, but I don't think he's really all that bad. And I think like we as Jets fans hate him more than maybe he deserves. I mean, I still think he kind of blows, but not terribly. So yeah, he's fine. It's definitely a position that like I would like to have the long-term answer at. You want to have that Nick Mangold. What do you got to say?
I'm just going to say, like, to me, it's so funny because I always thought of that the same way with the Colts because of Jeff Saturday. And I don't mean to say that it's not an important position, but it's like, it's not.
It's definitely important, I think.
It's the least important along the line.
Dude, I just don't think that's true.
I'm just not seeing it because I've never had bad center play. Like we brought in Ryan Kelly right after, and he has been a very serviceable, good. He's made a Pro Bowl or 2. So I've never had like terrible center play, but I don't know. I've never looked at it as like the most important part. So tell me why.
Yeah, I think what's important about center is just the calls that you have to make at the line. You're the one kind of directing everything and pointing things out to your quarterback, to your other linemen. You're making some audibles, maybe not audibles, but just like kind of identifying the defense and helping getting those play calls correct. So
gotcha.
It is important, and obviously that can vary scheme to scheme. And I'm not going to act like I'm like an O-line guru who knows all the
about
ins and outs.
The intricacies of being
for sure.
on that team though than I do.
I just think that it's an important position. It's not the end of the world to have a guy like Connor McGovern, but what worries me is like right now the backup center on the depth chart is Dan Feeney, who's more of a guard, right? And then Connor McGovern, like you said, probably not going to be signed next year. So I do just kind of worry about, and not even really worry, because it's like, sure, maybe we can just sign McGovern again if he has a pretty decent year for not a ton of money, or maybe we can find another guy. But I would definitely love, like, I would have loved to somehow pick up Linderbaum this year, or just one of these guys that I think can come in and really hold down the fort. Obviously, it's easier said than done to just get a player like that. But I do wish that the center was at least a little more reinforced with some depth, because if Connor McGovern goes down, like, you're not feeling confident about your center play.
Well, at least Feeney and Wilson are best friends. I'm sure they play slap ass a lot.
That's true. They are best friends.
You do make a good point. Every time that a center gets injured in a game, and then you have that backup come in, and like the first play, he just has a terrible snap.
Every time.
It's a good point. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just always think of when I think of positions that to me don't matter, it's because they lack the most talent at the front. But like the best centers, like it's not like a deep list of great centers, but that's also probably because a lot of the best offensive linemen play left tackle or they're at other positions. So maybe it's just the fallout of that. But no, you're right. It's more important than I'm probably giving it credit for, because you're right. Calling out the pre-snap assignments and kind of helping be the quarterback of the offensive line probably is an extremely important asset to have. So it'll be interesting to see, like we were saying, this is a good offensive line. If all five are healthy, and if you're even just a little bit below average, it's probably not going to show as much around other guys that are, toward the top of their position. So he's a guy to kind of circle and be like, I'm just curious, because it can go one of two ways. It can either be like he sticks out like a sore thumb, or we don't even notice it because everybody else is doing so well, and the unit just meshes together. Moving along to the right side, ABT, we talked about him earlier, moving over from left guard to right guard. As you mentioned, played a ton of positions in college, came in all rookie left guard in his first season. To me, and I don't know, to me, he's one of the most exciting assets for the team. When guys just come out from day one and are instant impact starters, that's to me like, okay, I don't have to worry about this position for X amount of years. And he did that. And now he's also solving another problem by just switching over to a different position and covering that hole. In terms of like, you've lived through so many terrible draft picks, and all of us have. Every team has dealt with terrible draft picks and terrible free agent signings. Even though he's at a position like guard that people don't look at as like a sexy position, what was it like seeing him have such a good, solid rookie season?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I do think the Jets have had way more bad draft picks in the past 10 years than a lot of other teams.
Yeah,
I don't know thinking back through the years, if I could find any other guard draft pick that we've had that was remotely decent.
That's a good point.
But no, I mean, it's awesome. And like, you're kind of given the like, yeah, I mean, I know he's just a guard. Like, I do not care that he's just a guard. Like, we've talked about it before. Like, you can say guard's not a premier position. The offensive line is so important. The interior offensive line is so important. I mean, we've had plenty of years where we had decent tackles and the inside of like three guys are just horrible, and it ruins the offense. And I just think that having someone as solid, what I loved about him when we traded up for him was he was kind of the only guard in that class that was like you can plug him in right away and he's going to be good type of guy. And then that's the expectation that he lived up to. Yeah. So I have high expectations for him. I think he should go out there and be an all-pro next year, or at least in that conversation. But I definitely just think that there's no reason he shouldn't ascend to being, top 2, 3, 4, 5 guards in the league and continue to be here for 5-10 years. And I think that's, very, very exciting.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, I scoffed a little when you said,
all pro,
but right guard is also one of those positions where like kind of like with tackles, the best ones play left guard. So let me just go through this
Yeah.
because Quentin Nelson plays left guard. I think Zach Martin is the one that still stays on the right side. I think he's the one that's always just been a right guard. But yeah, all of the top guys really play on that left side. So it's not unfair to say that he could be one of the top 2 or 3 right guards in football next year, which is crazy. But he had such a good rookie season that's kind of where the bar is. I was going to say Pro Bowl, which I think is totally obtainable, especially if the Jets come out and have one of the most productive run games. Like I think when you're judging an offensive line success, like especially for an interior position, it's more looked at with the run game and just how consistently all 5 move together. Tackles, I feel like, just benefit a little bit more for how they do in pass protection, but ABT could go out there if the Jets are one of the top running offenses and certainly take up that spot. So I'm trying to think it. I don't want to put you on the spot here in terms of like young assets on this team. That's not fair. There's too many new.
I mean,
young
there's
guys
so many. Yeah, it's hard, but
especially with this past rookie draft and them getting 3 first-round picks and Breece Hall. It's tough to say like where AVT is on that list, but outside of the guys,
when you think about last year's draft class and this year's draft class and kind of like the premier guys. So you have Wilson, you have give me the guys. Wilson, AVT, Michael Carter, Elijah Moore from last year. And then this year you have Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall. So like that's a list of 8 guys. Elijah Vera Tucker is already the most established out of those guys and kind of the one I think we have to worry about the least. So when you're thinking about this young core that we're building and, those 8 guys are kind of the core of, okay, where can we start and grow this team? I think that you can't overstate the amount that like he has separated himself, at least for now, and Elijah Moore had a great year last year, ended on an injury, which wasn't great. Michael Carter had a great year. Like these guys, it's not like they didn't establish themselves because they very much did. And I think all those guys showed that they belong on an NFL field, but AVT is the one who out of that core, he's like the one piece where you're like, yes, that is going to be the core going forward. Right. And there's not really as many question marks. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you can understate his value. I don't think he's just like a throwaway pick.
Yeah, no, he's
obviously
solid.
Throwaway pick,
right. Yeah. All right. And let's get Fatty out of the conversation.
Come on, bro. Don't be saying that, dude. Mekhi Becton's going to come out with a shirt that says freaking Chasing 69 sucks.
Think
or something.
Fatty.
It's just going to say Fatty. God, what are you doing to us? No, I'm just kidding. That's fine.
When look, we don't, like I said, we do not need to talk about this because we have for 6 weeks. All of the eyes are on him because of his potential, because of the weight scenario. And now he's, 100% cleared from his injury to play. Time to show everybody that you can be the future franchise left tackle that you are supposed to be, that we saw you be a little bit in your rookie season. To me, the only thing that I want to talk about with him is like, if he's not ready, if he's not starting out there week 1 and say this thing goes south, like what do the Jets do? Because this kind of ties into a conversation around the bench guys, unless you want to say anything else about Becton that we have.
No, I don't want to spend a ton of time, but I do the only thing I want to say is like, at the end of the day, I'm on Mekhi Becton's like side. Like I'm rooting for him. I'm not like, I just want to like go on the record and say that, but
we all are, Matt.
But yeah,
I call you Fatty, but I would love for you to be great.
Yeah, and he is a great Fatty. I mean, he's a question mark. Like we've talked about it before, and I think so many people feel like they have to give analysis and they have to pick a side, and it's like, sure, that's great, but at the end of the day, Mekhi Becton is a question mark. Like he's either going to go out there and be really good, he's going to go out there and underperform, or he's going to not be able to get out there because of his injuries and his weight and all that shit. So we just got to see how it goes. But I guess before we just even talk about the depth guys, when you look at those 5 guys we just talked about, I mean, this O-line looks great. It really, I mean, it feels like there's not a ton of holes. It feels like your worst player is Connor McGovern, who's not really that bad. he's not a guy who's going to like cause a lot of
He's
problems. So that is great. But then just, you got to think of the possibility. Obviously all these guys can get injured. And Mekhi Becton, who knows what's going to go down. And then that'll bring us into, the depth pieces. So I think because we're talking about Mekhi, it's best to talk about the tackles. We can talk about the two main tackles and two main guards.
Yeah. My question is, Becton's not ready week 1. Where are the Jets going? We've got a rookie and a guy that got brought back in this past offseason. What do you think?
Yeah. So the options, Connor McDermott, I believe signed him this year again to a 1-year deal, or is this just his last? Yeah. So we signed him and they brought him back in. When I was looking at this, I kind of just wanted to see like how much did we actually invest, $1.5 million, not a huge deal for a veteran at all. And then the other option is Max Mitchell, who's the rookie that we took in the 4th round. I definitely want to hear your analysis on him over mine, but I do, just quickly to answer your question, Connor McDermott is the easy answer. He's established. He's been in the league. He's been on the Jets. We brought him back. You assume you brought him back for a reason. But, best case scenario is obviously going to be that this 4th round pick shows that, okay, yeah, you need a guy to step in. I'm that guy, and maybe he could be a guy who sticks. But yeah, I mean, tell me a little about where your thinking is. And especially I'd like to hear, your kind of analysis of Max Mitchell, because you're the draft guy,
Yeah, to me, the answer is neither of these guys, and hopefully it's Riley Reef at the end of the day. Like, like number one, I just, they've been meeting with Riley Reef. My hope is like if Becton's not ready, they're bringing Reef in like the next day. And I would still just bring him in just in case, because I don't like you
can't have too many good depth pieces.
And you can't trust Becton yet. He hasn't earned the trust of this team, and I'm so excited to talk about this with Flight 2022 because it's my favorite part of the entire series. So to me, the top option is Riley Reef. Now, if they don't do that, it's Connor McDermott. He's had experience at both tackle positions. Max Mitchell, to me, is a guy that, like, if we're going to slow play a 4th round pick and hopefully he could be like a fringe starting right tackle, he'd be perfect for that, because right now in college, he struggled with bigger pass rushers. He doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the athleticism. That's something that is going to take time and in the weight room to get up to, because it's not just that he's in the NFL now. It's like he struggled to handle it in college as well too. So strength, one-on-one pass situations, just not his game right now. He is so technically sound as an offensive lineman. And there was a clip, like you mentioned to me before we did the show, in Flight 2022, where he makes this great recovery and his footwork is unbelievable. Some of the best footwork of the tackle class of this past draft. Great in pass protection in terms of him just being, set in his stance, and just the technique is there. So to me, he's a guy that in his head has the makings of being like a good offensive tackle. And good is in the sense of like, he needs to be bigger. He needs to be stronger to even be close to being a starting tackle. But I would rather have a guy and try and build that up in the weight room than to have a guy that's really unrefined and doesn't understand his pass rush technique or his pass blocking technique, and doesn't have, good footwork. He's clunky. I like the player, but to me, he's more of like a 2 years down the road when he's hit the weight room and they've got him eating his Wheaties every morning.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not a bad thing, but
he's
it just comes down to whether we're going to need him.
Exactly.
Obviously, I think the Jets, seem pretty bought into him, but obviously they just picked him. So why wouldn't they be?
By the way, what's that other tackle's name from the McCagnon era that's still around? We didn't put him in this list, but I'm going to pull it up right now.
The other Chuma Adoga?
Yeah.
Chuma Adoga. Yeah, he's a guy who I don't ever want to see in again. But the thing is with it is hard to like watch the O-line during the game, right? Like a lot of where you actually obviously when guys are horrible,
it's not where the action is.
So that's the thing with like a lot of these guys who are just kind of like fringe starters, backups who played like with Gase and like, you know, 2018, 2019, like guys who were around then, like they just have such a bad taste in my mouth. They
Yeah,
like because of how just horrible they were. So that, I mean, I think Connor McGovern, you know, he was around 2 years ago. Like I think maybe that's part of the reason why Jets fans kind of don't like him, even though he isn't that bad.
Right.
But yeah, so you know, O tackle, depth, I don't love it. I don't think it's as bad. I think that like my feelings on the Jets depth pieces going into this and then coming out of this, I think I'm higher on the depth than I thought I was. I don't think they have as many issues as they need, and a lot of that comes down to the guys we'll talk about next when we talk about guard. But I am higher up on like these backups than I was going in. I think a big reason for that is I kind of forgot that we had signed Nate Herbig off the Eagles practice squad. And I mean, he's not like a player who's, you know, that I'm going to like really trust and really want out there. But what he is a guy who like last year, I think he played in all the games, but he only started 5 games last year, started 12 games in 2020. This is going to be going into his 4th year in the league. So I just like the idea that we signed a guy, was there with Joe Douglas in the Eagles. So Joe Douglas has some experience with him and has played, you know, has just like been out on the field and gotten some experience. I just think that's kind of undervalued when you think about a lot of these depth pieces that, you know, are only making $1 or $2 million a year. So yeah, I mean, you mix him with Dan Feeney, kind of the guard center combo, best friends with Zach Wilson. I like 100% think that if he wasn't best friends with Zach Wilson, they wouldn't have re-signed him. I don't like they could have easily signed another guard or
not
like
just
another guy
Feeney,
to fill that role
too. There's 2 guys on the that are
Who
on the
else
team
do you
right
think?
now.
Not Braxton. No.
Braxton.
No.
Yes. They talk about it in the flight 2022.
No, okay, that's important. And you know, my thing with Braxton and you know, I don't know if I have like notes about this.
Let's save it. Let's finish up the offensive line.
Braxton's underrated.
All right, keep going.
All right. Well, I mean, that's really it. I mean, I don't hate Herbig. I think it's like good that we added a player who's just started games, been out there. And then Dan Feeney, I don't really think he's all that good, but he's been around. He obviously gets along with the team. He obviously is familiar with the system since he was there last year. So if any of these guys have to step in, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button. It's obviously not ideal, but I don't think it's the end of the world if any of these 4 backups that we touched have to kind of get the nod. So, so, you know, I just think overall this is not 100% what it needs to be, but it's a lot closer than maybe I would have told you last week before really diving into these guys.
Yeah, my thing with the bench, you know, last week we talked about the defensive line and just how fucking deep it is. The offensive line, to me, no team has good offensive line depth. And the reason for that is because most teams expect their offensive line to be out there. And you know, frankly, for 5 positions and guys play one specific position, there's just not a ton of great talent out there. So I don't know what team I'm going to be looking at and be like, you know, their offensive line depth is fantastic. To me, it's one of those position groups like, and you really only notice it when the injuries happen, and it sucks when it happens. You know, the Colts lost Anthony Costanzo, who retired last, 2 off seasons ago. It sucked at left tackle for the Colts last year. But to me, when you have 5 good starters, really all it takes is just consistency there. If one guy misses and you plug in another, it's not the end of the world. You know, like I said, the Colts had a left tackle problem, but they were still the number 1 rushing team in the league, had one of the best offensive lines. And so you can kind of get by with subpar depth on the offensive line, as long as it's not like 3 guys are injured. That's when it gets problematic. And if you're at that point, that's just an unlucky season because you're not really supposed to lose those guys. Now, it doesn't help that Becton already has those kind of scares a little bit and that Fant's a little bit older, but when I think of the interior guys specifically, because we were just mentioning, like, I agree, Herbig and Feeney aren't, they're not starting caliber players, but the hope is that Laken, who's been in there for 81 straight games, is that type of player, and that AVT on the other side as well too, who I don't believe has injury history at all, kind of replicates that same thing. So, Teddy, I'm going to give my grade out. I give this offensive line a B plus. When you did this, are you basing it off of like Becton is the starting tackle? Like when you gave out your grade? Cause I guess I just am realizing like it's a B plus if Becton is out there. And, but we talked about him as the starter. So I feel like it's fair to grade it as such.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the way to kind of do it. I'm going with a B, and I think it's kind of baked into it. I think that, I mean, like I said, I think it's a really good offensive line. I think all 5 guys stay. There's no top 10 best offensive lines. I mean, last year our offensive line was good. Like that's something that a lot of people kind of like don't give they're like, oh, the offensive line stunk last year, that's why Zach Wilson stunk. And it's like, okay, well, the offensive line was actually decent. So yeah, I mean, I'm giving him a B, and that's kind of baked into it. I like think with maybe one more piece of depth, like maybe if they signed Riley Reef, and if Mekhi Becton was like good to go, we expect him out there, he's playing, like I think I would have definitely given an A-, just because I do think there's not much more other than like having an all-star guy who, you know, we're hoping AVT and Becton and even Laken Tomlinson and Fant can be, you know, other than having like a premier, you know, whoever the best tackle in the league is. I don't really think there's much better the Jets could be doing right now. So I think I give them a B, baking in the concerns with Becton and the lack of some depth, but I think at the end of the day, like it's still pretty solid.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the thing with Reef now, and I think this is like kind of where I'm at, is I believe there's not a transaction done yet because he doesn't know if he's got a starting job. And I would feel like if you're a tackle that is in free agency and knows he is going to be a starter somewhere, probably is waiting for the team to be like, we actually need you right now. And the Jets aren't at that point yet because they would hope to not need him right now. So I was because like they met with him so long ago, and it's like, why haven't they gotten something done yet? And it's probably just because he wants to be a starter next season if he's playing, and there's probably not that guarantee in New York right now.
Yeah, I think your take on the right tackles was kind of like, it kind of made sense where you're saying, okay, well, if Mekhi Becton ends up not being ready, not being able to play, like what is the Jets move? And I do think like that's the Jets move, you know, is going out and signing him. What's the point of signing him in June when maybe you won't
to be a
need
bench
him,
guy,
or you could figure out right? So
and he would look at that as well too. There's no way he's trying to be a bench guy for a team. Like he wants to be a starter. He's been a starter his entire career.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it would be definitely a good move. So yeah, we'll see, but there it goes.
Yeah, one of the few position groups that I ended up giving a little bit higher of a grade on than you. So I'm glad we got to finish that off on a positive note from Blake here. So I go the B plus, Teddy goes the B, and that's the Reading the Room series.
Very fun. Very fun.
It was fun to do. And Teddy, now we get to talk about Flight 2022. So
let's do it. I'm amped.
The production is where I want to start off because I feel like we can dive into the specifics of it, but just like how well it was done. And there are a ton of great franchises out there that do these series, and they're all fantastic because if you're a $1 billion corporation, you're going to have great aspects at every level almost. And you know, I'm someone that the Colts have had one the last 2 or 3 seasons now that I love, and they do it they drop it weekly throughout the offseason. So it's always cool because you're like catching up on what just happened like a week ago instead of it being a few months back. But they crushed it with this. I love the people that they got on it. And I think that's just the allure of being in New York. You know, you have Schefter on there, you have Rich Eisen narrating it, which like, what could have been better? Who could have been more fit to narrate that series than Rich Eisen? You have all the big guns out there talking about the Jets. Really well done. I love the looks that you got with some of the coaches and players in their home lives. The behind the scenes access to who these people are outside of football was really cool. There's one guy I can't wait to talk about because I think for the most part he stole the show as a guy that maybe you didn't know a ton about, but after the series you're like, man, I'm really rooting for this guy.
Excited to hear who that is for
Yeah,
sure.
yep. And so I just thought it was really well done in as a whole, Teddy, from a fan's perspective. Because look, we talked about this last week. They want you to be excited about the team, so they're going to make this to make you excited about the team. But what was going through your head when you finished it?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on the production quickly, I completely agree. I think I see this take on Twitter all the time, like when Hard Knocks season comes around, but people are always like, why do we need Hard Knocks when we just have like these things that the Jets put on every week, you know? And they have episodes like this. I mean, obviously not the same thing, but things like this throughout the season. And, you know, for the past 3 or 4 years, I think they've had this kind of like one Jets drive production going on, and it's they nail it every time. I think that's interesting because I especially have been saying that a lot about just like, yeah, I mean, they put out what they want us to hear, and so obviously you're going to be excited. I think definitely when they're discussing free agents, that's prevalent. But what I definitely think is that, like, in the draft, sure, they're going to cut it up in a way that it makes it seem like everything's going their way, but like basically in the draft everything went their way. And I don't know, I mean, how should we go in this? I got a list of notes, you got a list of notes. I mean, do you want to go chronologically? Do you want to go what are you thinking here?
I think I said that at the beginning that I didn't want to do episode by episode, but I almost think now that kind of makes the most sense now that I'm sitting here, because like it does break it down systematically through.
Yeah. Let's just go for it. I'll let you start if you're all right with that, and I'll jump in with things that I think.
Yeah. So to me, episode 1, you know, we're kind of just setting the stage for the early parts of free agency and the expectations of what they're looking to get off from this offseason. One of the things that I think you love seeing, because they took this plan and they put it into motion, was bringing in free agents that have playoff experience. And it's the fact of this Jets team is extremely young, not a ton of great success for a lot of these players throughout their careers. They don't know what it's like to win in those big stages. And so what do? They go get Laken Tomlinson, ton of playoff experience, been in a Super Bowl. They bring in Jordan Whitehead, has won a Super Bowl, playoff experience with Tampa Bay. DJ Reed has playoff experience with Seattle. Who else am I forgetting? Is there one other guy that's playoff? Oh, Uzoma this past season with Cincinnati. So like, they were like Sal was sitting there saying, like, we need guys to kind of teach a young team how to win and what it means to be on that stage. So I really loved that. I thought it was cool getting into Zach Wilson's house a little bit, seeing him talk about the rookie season. To me, because I mean, when you take a look at numbers wise, and we know it got better towards the end of the year, it wasn't a fantastic first rookie season. But I liked that he kind of likened it to his first year in college. And it's just like, this is what I learned in my first year of college. This is what I learned in my first year of pros. And then in college, this is what I did to take steps into years 2 and 3 to eventually make me the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. So you're just hoping that those same things kind of click for years 2 and 3 in the pros.
Just to touch on that quick.
Things. I'll go ahead.
No, you're good. But with Zach Wilson, like he's always shown that he has like a good head on his shoulders, and even like pre 2021 draft, right? Is he that 20? Yeah. Even like before that, you know, what you heard about him was like, oh, he studies a lot of film. Like he's going out of his way. He wants to know the offense, wants to know his reads, like, and things like that, you know, make you confident just that he's putting in the work, that he's, you know, that he's like trying to fix the things he was bad at. And I agree that the way he compared it to, well, I didn't do that great my first year, but then I was able to apply everything I learned, you know, it gives you hope, because it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And that was one of his knocks, you know, when we drafted him, was like, yeah, well, he had a good last year, but what about the year before? And it's like, hopefully he seems like the type of guy who's able to realize the mistakes he's making and then, you know, fix them. So I totally agree. I'll let you keep going, because I you know, I'll jump in, but you're doing good here.
The only other thing that I had from episode 1 was like some of the Senior Bowl footage, and this has nothing to do with the Jets necessarily, but like, they were kind of hinting at some other guys that they were definitely interested in this draft process. Trevor Penning, tackle out of Northern Iowa, freak athlete, kind of the same type of build as Becton, just not, I guess, more pro ready. So, and then the other guy was Perion Winfrey, an interior defensive lineman from Oklahoma. Like, you're seeing who they were, at least a little bit interested in and who they thought would be good talent. So to me, not even from the aspect of like, oh, did they mess up by not taking this guy or that guy? It'll be interesting to see like the guys that they liked, what careers do they go on to have? Because that's just going to be cool to see where like you can evaluate how they've drafted their own guys. But when you know that they've liked Penning, he goes to the Saints and say he's a starter day one, and Perion Winfrey, you're like, okay, this front office does know how to recognize talent.
Yeah, and in that same vein, I think the scout who was going to Ike Ekwonwu's whatever pro day right, that's what it was.
They
loved him right,
so much.
which we all knew, and obviously that's not what they ended up doing. But it is, it's just like, hey, we were all kind of right that they really loved this guy who a lot of other people loved. Mm-hmm. And kind of in that vein, directly associated, what I really liked, and I think this might have actually happened later, but they showed it in the first episode or something. But when Salah's just talking about, they're talking about, draft picks or whatever, and you see him he says, when you have a game-changing like edge, that's the easiest way to affect a football game is, an elite game-breaking edge. And he's like, does a game-breaking corner have that same effect on a football game? I'd argue yes. And it's like, I love that Salah, he's not like, he doesn't have all these like stupid like football rules that like we all seem to like take as gospel, where he's like, oh, well, I'm not going to draft a corner in the top 5. I'm going to draft an edge rusher. He is able to recognize like, hey, this corner might be an out of this world talent, and I still believe we can get, help elsewhere. And I still think he'll be able to affect the game. So after all the conversations this offseason, obviously we saw them take a cornerback. So that question was kind of answered for us, but it's just nice to see that like Salah does think like that, and he's not scared to kind of be slightly different than maybe something other GM or other coaches would be scared to do. So yeah, I definitely like that.
Anything else with the first episode? Episode 2.
Let's keep it rolling.
Episode 2 gave me like my 2 biggest things.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll let you.
The guy that I mentioned first that like I just like am rooting for so hard now. I'm such a big Mike LaFleur guy.
Okay, I knew that's who it was gonna be. And his like the way he sits down and kind of dissects the film.
He's so
I remember
smart.
in last year's flight, 2021, I guess. Yeah. That was like my first real exposure to Mike LaFleur.
This was mine,
and just hearing him talk and his football acumen and things like that. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't be high. I'm happy to hear you say this, because like I really couldn't be higher on him. And he, had a rocky start, which I attribute a lot to personnel last year, but I think he really showed a lot in his first season. So I definitely am on his side as well.
So much to the point where I think if this season does go well for the Jets, and it's like you said, good problems are good problems. He's, the Athletic just put out a piece yesterday, and it's like the top 40 assistants under the age of 40, and he's on that list. It's like, if next season the Jets make this leap, he's the guy that's probably going to benefit from it the most, because what stands in the way of him getting ahead? Like he's so well respected. He's so intelligent. He's showing you that. I mean, you learn so much just by even just watching the few clips of him breaking down film. And to me, he's a guy that like, if next year goes well, what's the job opportunity? Because he should be in second round interviews for them.
I'd like to think, he needs at least one more year after that, just because he is kind of young. But I mean, we're obviously seeing that shift in
that's been
coaching,
a totally new.
But I mean, I don't want to lose him. Obviously, we can't overhype him too much, because we got to see him put it together. But But just with like his creativity and the way you see him talking about his players, I think he's a good guy that we can be excited about. next thing I want to talk about
Go ahead.
is Laken Tomlinson.
That was where I was going. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just
And we just spoke
because
about him a bunch, but this was a big
true,
episode
true.
for him.
Yeah, what I liked, I mean, and I'll kind of let you take the floor after this, but what I liked was when you show them dissecting film of these guys available for agents. And number one, this was just an overall note of the show, but like they could not instill more confidence in like their process to me, like the way that they go about. Coaches identify what type of players they want. Scouts and front office people go after those specific type of players. They review them as a whole. They do their grading separately. Like, I love everything about that. And then when you hear John Benton, the offensive line coach, say my number one guard, Laken Tomlinson, and then you have another guy saying, yeah, I actually have him over Scherf, that just like gets me so excited because not only did we sign one of these top guys, but in coaches on our team, they were their number one guy, and that's who we got. So just to be able to see that, and like, maybe a few years ago, Laken Tomlinson wouldn't have wanted to sign with the Jets, but now with Robert Saleh here, a coach he's familiar with, we're able to get him in and really solidify the line. I just loved seeing that kind of insight that for our actual offensive line coach, he was the number one guy.
Yeah, definitely. I like I said, I love the fit and I love the signing. The only thing that I thought was also just crazy is like, he's so fucking physical on the field. He seems like the nicest fucking guy off of it. He seems like just a big teddy bear.
They were talking about how he was like how he's like a monster, and then they show him like in a press conference. I'm like,
exactly.
This guy?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was a good one. My other thing, and I'm gonna bounce back here from this episode, is I hinted at it twice earlier in this episode. Saleh was talking about his process and the kind of player he's looking for, and we've talked about, yes, this team loves the high character guy, but this was my favorite thing. You've got your 4 squares of production and trust. And obviously the top guy that you want is in that top left corner. He's very productive and he's very trustworthy. But at the end of the day, they'll take trust over production when it comes down to it. And to me, that's
Navy
like
SEALs like
exactly
motto or style.
Exactly.
Yeah, I loved that as well.
Exactly.
They're looking for guys that they know are going to be putting in the work, as opposed to guys who are just, for themselves. I think it kind of leans to like how we didn't take Kayvon Thibodeau, even though me and you were beating the drum saying, like, who cares about these character concerns? It's Kayvon Thibodeau. I just listened on the Around the NFL podcast, which is one I like a lot. He was on it for the 3rd time, and he seems fine, and I do like. I don't think that having a big personality and being about your brand, like, I don't think that hurts you as a football player. But I do see that potentially the Jets were, maybe this isn't the guy that we want. Maybe we want a different guy. After watching this, you kind of get it.
That's huge. I totally agree with that. And to me, the only other guy that it screamed to was Becton. And I don't want to bring him up too many times, but it's like, man, when you produce, it's great, but we need to be able to trust you. And that's where when I was saying, like, with who's going to be the left tackle, like, I trust Fant. I do not trust Becton. That's where I'm at with the spectrum of it. And it just was like, they need to trust you. But more so, like you're saying, the guys that they're bringing in, trust is the number one. Trust is the number one. What's the word I'm looking for?
Priority.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Jeez, brains breaking.
Yeah. And then, I mean, do you have anything else on?
Not
on
with
that?
Episode 2. What else?
Well, so I don't remember if this was 2 or 3, but when they were signing Braxton, maybe this was episode 3.
I think it was 2. I think it was right around the end of 2, but
kind of similar to talking about the process with Laken. What I really like to see, and again, this is all cut up. We don't know everything, but with Braxton, it at least seemed like the way that they go through their process of evaluating free agents is, I would have thought they said, okay, who on our team do we want to bring back? And then, okay, now next step, who's available do we want to bring back? What it seems like they were actually doing was they were going through the list of guys, and then they say, okay, next one up, one of our guys, Braxton Berrios. And they dissect him. Now, here's my Braxton Berrios take, and I've been thinking about this like all week. Obviously, he's not like the best receiver in the world. And when you're kind of like from a prospect standpoint, like when you're just looking at the analysis of, okay, what is Braxton Berrios' like talents, what are his strengths, weaknesses, blah blah blah, he's not going to rank like very highly on the overall NFL list, you know. But what Braxton Berrios is and what he does, every time he's like been on the field and every time he's had an opportunity to produce, and you know, not every time, but most of the time he has done something with that opportunity, and he's made plays. And in his couple years, you know, we signed him after getting cut from the Patriots, so he's kind of just like a fringe player. And every year, you know, he's been out there. Every year he's become kind of a reliable guy for the quarterback. Every year he's scoring touchdowns. Every year scheming plays for him. I think it comes down to like when we were debating, when all the Jets fans are debating whether we should re-sign him. Sure, you can easily say, hey, Braxton Berrios, he's a great player, but there's a lot of guys better than him out there, whatever. But just when you're just analyzing like, what does this guy do when he goes on the field, I think he's a much higher player than maybe some other NFL receivers in the league that you would say, well, this guy I would definitely say is better than Braxton, but he hasn't had nearly the production in the amount of time, you know?
Yeah.
So I just think like it can get lost. And so I just want to like put that out there defending Braxton. But also to your point, like, how can you cut a guy who has done that production, was an all-pro special teamer as a returner, and then is also your quarterback's best friend? Like that just locks it in.
No, I feel bad for saying that was the only reason they brought him back, because obviously he provides a ton of value and is one of the best returners in football. I think the money is where I would be like, okay, I think they probably opened up a little bit more to bring him back, and I'm sure there was interest from other teams in that range that got them to that point. But I think when they looked at it and they knew that they were going to have, you know, 3 receivers ahead of him on the depth chart, they probably wouldn't have wanted to go for that big of a contract. But at the end of the day, I mean, it still wasn't bad. It wasn't like a disastrous deal to sign.
Yeah. And again, I mean, even if he's the 4th guy, he's going to be a guy who's going to be working in, and he's going to be out there punt return, kick return. So, you know, worth the money.
Yeah. That was all I really had for episode 2, and honestly for episode 3, unless there's anything I missed in 2 that you wanted to go over.
Nope, we're good.
3 for me was just very transactional with free agency. It was just really, we're hitting on the guys that we're bringing in. Coolest moment, obviously, and we knew that it was there, but it kind of see it on the film. You know, seeing Jordan Whitehead at the Revis draft party was
I wrote
sick.
that down
just
too.
Like the coolest moment.
Yeah, and just like, yeah, what are they? They're related somehow? Like, I honestly,
cousins.
Yeah, I've heard of the connection, but it caught me by surprise. I definitely like forgot about it.
It's really cool.
But yeah, that was awesome. They were just like, they like quickly paused it and highlighted, you know, some little kid in he was wearing Revis's high school jersey. You know, that is cool. Only other thing, this might have been episode 2, might have been episode 3. We're just kind of all over the place here. At one point, Mike LaFleur said, when he was describing the staff and like when they're going through their process, he said, there's no egos in this building. Like, everyone comes in and they put their ego aside. And I thought that was interesting, because when you think of an NFL front office and NFL GMs and an NFL coaching staff, like the number one thing you think of is ego. You know what I mean? Like, you think of all these guys, you know, I mean, you've
worked 20 plus years to get to that point,
right?
From most of them,
especially like the GMs and the head coaches, like there's only 32 of those guys in the world.
Yep.
So it's just kind of an interesting perspective when you hear him say that. You know, obviously they could have some issues in that he's not alluding to, but for him to say that, you know, and when you look at, okay, Robert Saleh seems very down to earth, Mike LaFleur, Jeff, all these guys do kind of have that vibe of like, they're putting the team over their own individual accolades. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing, because again, you think of NFL coaches, you think of ego. So it's just an interesting little statement to throw in there.
And even you think of, to me, when I think of it, like, the best coaches are the ones that don't have one. And I think a big influence in Robert Saleh's life, maybe not directly necessary, but very indirectly, is Mike Tomlin. And a guy like that is very humble and understanding
The
that like,
GOAT.
dude, he's one of the most consistent. He's never had a losing season, and he's been a
Yeah,
head
he's
coach for some really
unbelievable.
bad teams. But to me, I kind of look at them in the same light where it's like, the good head coaches understand that even despite getting to that point where they are the head coach, they can't do it without everybody else that is on that staff. And so that is really great to see and to hear LaFleur talk about. What was my other point with that? Oh, the other part. Yep. So it was I think that's also huge for Jets fans to kind of hear after what they had to deal with the last regime. And just that felt
Yeah,
like a very selfish and me. I did this. I run this. I control this. I'm gonna call the offensive snaps now because we've had a few rough weeks. Like it never felt comfortable with the last coaching staff, and that was only from seeing it from afar. So I think being able to show and really highlight, like, yes, we can talk about culture. You're going to get the inside eye. All of us really do check our egos at the door, and we're all just about making this team better.
definitely. All right,
Um,
this is the best part. Let's talk about the draft.
yeah, go ahead. Well, so can I tell you,
You s-
it was sauce all day,
it
all fucking
was
day, man.
they. I mean, going back to what I said when it was Salah kind of saying that about the corner, he's like, I think they do. They had no reservations about wanting him, and
All
and
him.
we were. It's unbelievable to me how
Crazy.
off like we were, and I mean there.
We
What
never
like
talked about
looking
it.
back, there were plenty of people projecting Sauce, but every time I saw it, I was like, those people don't really know what they're doing.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, man, I love it. I'm happy that they did it. It's hilarious to me that like Houston takes Stingley, another cornerback, the pick before them, and it's like, whoa, and yeah, it's just awesome.
The reaction,
I
we'll go back to that. The reaction when Houston took Stingley and Douglas and Salah just start freaking out. It's like they
Oh
took
yeah,
fucking
yeah,
Stingley
yeah.
over Sauce.
They
Like,
like
this is
look
the
at each
fucking
other.
best. They were so
Yeah.
excited about it. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and another thing I liked, they had Peter Schrager from Good Morning Football,
He's the
and he's
best. I'm
talking
a
about,
huge Schrager
yeah,
fan.
I'm a huge Schrager fan as well. But he's like, yeah, calling around coaches in the league when I would ask them like, who's the guy who's going to be that solid 10-year starter that you kind of know what you're going to get. He said Sauce's name was easily the most consistent to answer that question, and that's just even he said it. He's like, you don't want to put the expectations on him like that, but it is just kind of reminds me of Elijah Vera Tucker, where how they described him was like a guy who's going to come in and you know what you're going to get, and I could not be more excited for Sauce. I
Yeah.
just it's so awesome, and hopefully he can really change things.
Yeah, to me, like the Garrett Wilson selection, I don't think popped as much to me as the Jermaine and the Sauce one. It was a great pick. They took the best wide receiver available. Is there anything specific with Wilson? Because I really want to talk about Jermaine.
I think that's interesting you said that, because I definitely thought they kind of put in that little like Drake London gets picked, and they kind of like looked at each other
They'll
and
look at each other.
smiled.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was funny, Joe Douglas is on the phone. Who knows who he's on the phone with, but he goes, their test, so someone had told him that the number 9 pick was going to be Charles Cross, the tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my takeaway, well, let's talk about Jermaine Johnson, but
No, go
through the
ahead.
first 10 picks,
Yeah.
through the first 10 picks, and really including Jermaine Johnson, like the takeaway from this was that the Jets did kind of go 3 for 3. And like,
Yeah.
we talk about a lot, how they're gonna frame it in a way where it looked good for the Jets. So after the draft, they're gonna say, yeah, Garrett Wilson was our number 1 receiver, Sauce was our number 1 corner, Jermaine Johnson was our top 8 player, like whatever. Regardless of it being a show and they can edit and cut, like those things were just clear and true. Like
Yeah.
Sauce was the prospect that they wanted going in.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson was the receiver that they wanted to draft at 10. And then Jermaine Johnson was the guy that they had as a top 8 player and then went up and got him. And so it's just funny because it's like, yeah, you let the draft fall to you, whatever. It really does seem like the Jets went in with a plan executed that plan exactly how they were hoping, got the exact two, like the Jets could have been picking 1 and 2 and they would have picked Sauce and Garrett Wilson in. Like that's what I think is so interesting. And then you throw that in with, oh, and we're also going to get our number 8 overall player, our probably number 1 edge rusher based on what Woody Johnson said, 20 picks later.
That whole process was so crazy. And the moment that stood out to me the most was like, he knew Kansas City was trying to take an edge rusher. And we knew that the Jets called literally every team in the teens and into the early 20s trying to get that. And
I think it was 15 and back.
Dude, and when he saw that the Chiefs had traded up, he was like, fuck this. Like because he knew Kansas City was looking at an edge. And they didn't go edge. They took their edge with their second first round pick. And so like just that roller coaster that they were going through, thinking like, fuck, we just missed him. Wait, no, we didn't. We still have a chance to get our guy. The come get me line was great from Jermaine. I know that wasn't something that was like new to the show. We had, he had said to them, like, come get me, but it's just cool to see in the process and how they kind of put that in there.
I do think it's interesting. Like when Jermaine Johnson is coming out of his meeting and he says that, like in his mind, was he thinking they would have to move up from 10 to get him?
It's a good point.
Or is he thinking like maybe I am going to be a late round first pick, and you can come get me. But I just thought that was interesting because a lot of people would have, even Jeff Ulbrich said it. He said, I wanted them to take Jermaine at 10, and it's like, a lot of people wouldn't have been surprised if he did go in the top 10, if he was the first edge rusher off the board. So it's just kind of interesting to think about. Yeah, we came and got him, but we did it at 26 as opposed to, 8.
Right. So yeah, that was a great episode. Is there anything else with 4?
That was like the draft episode.
Yeah.
No, and I honestly, I only have one for 5. I think you're going to love it.
I'm ready.
I'll let you start.
I mean, to me, it was more just like I liked.
This was just kind of like the fluff episode.
Yeah, I liked hearing Ulbrich break down Sauce's effort and the way he approaches the game. I liked, hearing like I think it was Douglas that said it. It wasn't Saleh, but like it was. We have these assets to get playmakers, and that's when they went up and they traded.
He was
up
like, "There's a reason we got all this draft capital."
Yep, this was a fun breakdown episode for LaFleur as well too. And then to me, the big, speech with Saleh and like closing the gap. Like that's what this season is about. Did I dance over your points, or where are you coming at?
No, you're good. I do just want to say, in terms of closing the gap, what I've really liked about this offseason, from, just like a press perspective, from how Saleh and Joe Douglas have kind of like expressed themselves is, they're not putting a mandate on anything. They're not saying we need to win X amount of games. We're not saying we have to make the playoffs, whatever. But the past couple of years, they would say, listen, we're here to win. You play the game to win, but at the same time, it's a young team. We just want them to get better. We want them to improve. That's still kind of the message. That's the communication, but they're definitely acknowledging like we can't. LaFleur said it like 100 times. He says the league waits for no one. Like you're doing your process great and you're executing your plan great. But at the end of the day, you do have to kind of increase the expectations and you have to start seeing some results. And I think that in their communication, in the way Sal is saying, we were 0-12 in our past 12 division games. Like that shit's got to stop, So yeah, the Jets are on their way, in my opinion, and this shows it. And it's just like, I like that they are at least putting some pressure on themselves. So we need to at least perform this year, and at least put up a fight. Anything you want to say on that before I give you the
just
the
to echo that actually, and because this is going back to the first episode, but Schefter was like, a divisional title, a playoff appearance, a playoff win, a Super Bowl would mean more to the Jets fan base than probably any other fan base in football. And not just from the fact of like, there are a lot of teams that haven't won, but there's no teams with as big of a market, with as big of a fan base that have been through so many years of bullshit. Like closing the gap closing the gap is what's going to make Jets Nation kind of go wild. Not even the fact of like, we need to be in the Super Bowl, this next year. It's just like knowing that this is going the right way is going to just make such a difference. And Schefter was mentioned that in the first episode.
Sometimes I like
a Jets fan. That was cool.
Yeah.
That was
sometimes
cool
I kind of push back on like the New York is a different type of market than everywhere else. But it really is. And you see that. I mean, you listed all those analysts, that were on it. Like
they aren't
doing so many NFL Jets analysts, or so many NFL analysts and personalities are Jets fans. And it's because they grew up in New York City, or, they went to Syracuse and somehow had a connection, or like there are so many Jets fans in the industry that it adds that extra, like you listen to a show, you watch a show, there's always like one Jets fan who he's kind of in it with us, which is interesting. So yeah, very cool. Very awesome series. I just wanted to add it up at the very end. They show a shot of Denzel Mims like coming out, and Salah comes up to him and they just dapped each other up and like bro hugged. It's good. It's good. They're bought in. Mims is back. Mims revenge tour.
Oh man, that is a great way to end it. I completely just glossed over that as like whatever.
That was the only note I wrote down in the 5th episode. I was like, I literally wrote shot of Mims and Salad dapping up was dope.
Well, here's the best part. We're only a couple months away from I think being able to finally to close this Mims chapter.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's funny. But
that's one of the. I can't wait to do like a questions of the off. Like, what are we most excited to answer? Like to get answers to. You know what I mean?
I'm excited. I want to do stuff of like what players have the most pressure on them heading into the season. There's a ton of fun stuff now that we're getting like into July and into the preseason. We've done fine bridging this gap between the boring parts. We still got a few weeks to go, but it's starting.
Our Reading the Rune series was elite. I
loved it. It was fun.
Yeah. If anyone has been listening the whole time, shout out you.
Shout out to you. Exactly. Teddy, that being said, very long podcast tonight.
I know. I knew
lots
it was
to talk
happen,
about.
But
me too. Okay. Just based on when I looked at the notes, I was like, yeah, we're going to go on for a bit, but it's okay. Anything else that we should touch
I'm good,
on?
man.
I think we did it.
Amazing. I think the Flight 2022 is awesome. It was fun to break it down. It was fun to watch it, hear your thoughts on it. And, I really enjoyed the Reading the Room series. I think that could be something we do, going forward.
Every offseason.
Yeah. So
why not?
Perfect. It was a blast. Appreciate you.
It was a blast. Appreciate you. Thank you guys so much for listening to Chasing 69, a New York Jets podcast at NYJ_Chasing69 on Twitter. Teddy at Teddy Huncho. I'm at Blake Andrew Pace. The YouTube channel NYJ_Chasing69 as well too. Share it with your Jets friends. Like it, review it, all that stuff that they tell you.
Give us some likes.
Yeah, give us some likes there. Give us some listens. Keep just hitting play. Every time you open up Spotify, just fucking press play on it, because why not? Appreciate you guys as always. For Teddy Pristash, I'm Blake Pace. We will talk to you next week.